Thank you, Payal. And in addition to her welcoming all of you, there's of course Neena, Shuli, Anjali, and Ritu who join me in welcoming you all to what we hope is going to be a really riveting and interesting year of Algebra evenings. This particular session that we're going to now speak of is something that is deeply, deeply troubling because it makes something visible that is absolutely invisible in our society. And what is even more disturbing is that even when it is visible, we give it no thought as being something that is the problem of others and not of ours. Nazia Erum is a young woman, a young mother with a 3-year-old daughter who went out and spoke to 148 other families to understand what it is to be a Muslim child in 21st century India. And she spoke to a class of people, to the schools in South Delhi, to the schools in Gurgaon and Noida, the world and environment and community that we inhabit. And what she has come away with is a story of such psychological suffocation, an experience that can only be described as a kind of tourniquet around the neck, a pincer-like movement where young children and families are forced to wear two kinds of nooses on their neck. One is to prove their nationalism to a hostile and suspicious majority community. And on the other hand, there is a pressure from within to express their Muslimness in a way that is acceptable to the community. So it's really like a double noose on the neck. And that experience is psychologically sculpting an entire new generation. And I'm not even speaking of the generations past, but at this very moment, a generation of children who are so isolated and so signaled out that there's inevitably going to be a crisis that faces us. Responsible for this is not just the political parties, not just the majoritarian view of the BJP, and the RSS and the entire Sangh Parivar. And we have seen a year of horrific violence where there have been lynchings, where Muslim boys are pulled out of trains or hacked to death and burnt. But it's not just the BJP and RSS that's responsible. Who is responsible also is the Congress and Mamta Banerjee and others who have also almost enslaved this community by playing to their most regressive elements. And so what we have today is a really potent cocktail of Islamophobia on the one hand and Islamism on the other. And what's caught in between is a whole generation of young children. She's spoken to kids as young as 4 and 5 and 6, and this is a story that we must listen to, engage with, and understand that we are entirely and totally a part of. So ladies and gentlemen, to listen to that story and understand where we fit in that picture of extreme violence, please welcome Nazia Erum.
Thank you so much, Shoma.
Thank you, Nazia. I, of course, forgot to mention that Nazia is, she has a fashion label of her own called the Luxury Label, and you well represent that right now, Nazia, so thank you for being here. Nazia, as I said, it's a really, really disturbing book because the community that you have spoken to is a community that lives all around us. You know, this is...
It is us.
It is us. It is us. What triggered the book? You know, why did you think of doing this book? Because yes, violence against Muslims to a certain extent is visible, as I said, in the lynchings and riots and, you know, terror blasts and false arrests. But we've never really looked at what's happening in the school. So what triggered you, you to write this book?
So the year was 2014 when I had my kid. February 2014, if we look back and if we remember the kind of dialogue that was there in the air, I was getting WhatsApp forwards for how the Muslim community should behave because they were no more a vote bank. I was getting WhatsApp forwards about how the next 5 years we'll be looking at. Now, Shoma, I was born, brought up in Assam. My Muslimness was never in my face. I was working with the Global Fund, the United Nations. I was traveling the world. My Muslimness was something that was there for me inside my home. It was between me and my God. But when I had my kid during that time, my image as a Muslim mother was pasted all over me. And frankly, I was scared. Because the first time I held my baby, I didn't know what to name her. I wasn't sure if I want to give her a very Muslim-sounding name, a Shabana or a Nasreen. I called her Myra because there's a meaning of Myra in every language. But it was a conscious decision, and I realized I was not alone. I was not alone in this worry. I realized every Muslim mother today is feeling very vulnerable. I am a Google mom. I Google even how to put on the diaper. I have Googled how to swaddle my kid. Instead of asking my mother, I would Google. So I've been there. I believe, for me, I wanted to believe that I was as much a millennial mother as anybody else. But also, I was a Muslim millennial mother. So how were my concerns going to be any different from those of a Christian mother or a Sikh mother or a Hindu mother? I didn't want them. The book was supposed to be a positive book. It was supposed to be a book of hope. But then how did this come was when I started speaking to people around me. First, I was sure that I wanted to speak to women who were like me, who were not living in ghettos, were probably working, who were living the idea of India in and out. What I discovered was when one person told me that their child, first was a 10-year-old, was bullied and was called a terrorist in class. I thought it was an isolated incident, and I decided not to pursue it further. We talked for 2 or 3 hours about how different ways of being a Muslim affects us and how we should be nurturing our kid. Second person told me, third person told me, fifth person told me, I just still thought it was an isolated incident. When I started seeing a pattern, I started asking this question: has your child been bullied on religious lines? I spoke to 118 in Delhi, which were from the top 25 schools. I spoke to 148 across India, that is the 12 cities. 80% said yes. And trust me, the rest of the 20% were like, why are you even asking me this question? I don't want to answer. So the rest of the 20% would be coming in that category, who probably did not answer or just gave me a one-word answer and did not have a conversation with me. So this was disturbing. This was not expected, and it's not just the numbers.
So in fact,
my book is not about numbers. My book is about the stories behind the numbers.
No, in fact, Nazia, I was just going to cut in to say that before we tease out all the implications of what you found, would you share some of the stories with the audience? You start with that very powerful story of a 5-year-old little girl called Azania. So let's start with that, and then if you can talk about some of the actual experiences that you discovered.
So the story of Azania, as Shoma said, the book starts with Azania. She's on a trip in a car with her parents. They're going to Algebra. They're driving down to Algebra. And suddenly they are passing this small city where it was a Friday afternoon. And the people were coming out of the mosque, which were visibly Muslim, white kurta pajama, the skull cap, many of them bearded. And the child screams inside the car, "Mama, the Muslims are coming. They're coming for us." And she starts cowering behind in the back seat. For a second, the parents didn't know what happened. Then they realized the child is scared of Muslims, and they did not know how to tell her that you are what you're fearing, that you yourself are a Muslim. And Shoma, I could really relate with this story because as I have a 3-year-old, she knows Allah. She knows how to do the namaz. She imitates her grandmother, me, her grandfather, her father. She imitates us while performing the namaz. She knows Allah, but I've never categorically told her that you're a Muslim. I've never told her there's a word called Muslim or there's a word called Hindu. Why do I need to put her in a box right now? So even after writing this book, I don't know when is the right time to tell her, how early is early or how late is late.
Again, to bring home to you just how powerful all these experiences are in terms of just how disturbing and violating they are, right from food to clothes to identity. This was one example, but kids being called Pakistani or a terrorist or Muslim are rampant through the book. But again,
these are not isolated stories. These are the same words. These are the same emotions that I found across India. Like the 6-year-old who asked the person sitting next to him in class, "Are you a Muslim?" When the child says yes, he says, "I hate Muslims," and he starts beating up that child. This is what we have done to our 6-year-olds.
You also have stories about kids on the basketball field, and then a hierarchy of insults as well. So would you just bring all that alive before, we move on to,
yes, so
as I said, the implications?
Stories from the sports where when it's happening with the younger children, it's more like innocently asked, "Are you Muslim?" When it's older children, 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds, they have egos, they're entered into the teenage phase. It's much more harsh, it's much more brutal, it's much more physical. It's like, they get into physical scuffles. They say, "You're a terrorist," and the other say, "Ki main dikhata hu terrorist kya hota hai." So, or say that, "Move away from the ball, you are a Pakistani. Go back to Pakistan." This happens in debates in class. We have teachers who are bullying, saying that, "Tum to bade ho ke Osama hi to banoge." I mean, how insensitive as a nation have we become? Then we don't take words like love and hate for the weight that they carry. This is not about Muslim kids. Make no mistake about that. This book is called Mothering a Muslim, but this is not about Muslim kids. This is about all kids out there, Shoma. Because nafrat, hate, will not see your religion. It will suck up every kid out there and spit out these disturbed adults who have been hitting each other from the age of 6. It's also like my Nana, to whom I've dedicated this book. He also wore the white kurta pajama. He also wore the skull cap. He also had a dari. He also had that long beard. But he was a man of his, the ideas of 70s were different. He was a man of his time. The ideas that are there today, we don't know what is reaching out to a child, when and where. How much gatekeeping will you do? And before, innocence used to sound like this. I remember a person who is now in their late 60s told me that when I was a kid, I just moved into this new house. And my neighbor asked, "Are you a Muslim?" She said, "Tum ho ge Musalman, main to Asma hu." So this was innocence. Or I remember Dr. Varis from Bombay telling me that her son, now he's in his late 40s, when he was 5 or 6, so the Maulvi Sahab would come to teach him the Quran, and he would tell him how a Musalman is, कि Musalman झूठ नहीं बोलता, Musalman ईमान रखता है, Musalman दूसरों की चीजें नहीं लेता. मतलब, you have all the good essential characteristics that every religion teaches their children. The Maulvi Sahab would teach that to the child. So this child had a guest at home, and he goes up to says that, "Moti uncle, पता है मेरे क्लास में सब मुसलमान हैं, बस अबरार और इरफान मुसलमान नहीं, क्योंकि वो झूठ बहुत बोलते हैं, बाकी सब मुसलमान हैं." So this was innocence. Now coming back to today's time, a conversation from Shikshantar Gurgaon, where we are sitting. Shikshantar is a very respected school. A conversation goes like this in kindergarten. "तुम मुसलमान हो क्या?" "हाँ, मैं मुसलमान हूँ, लेकिन मैं बीफ नहीं खाता." I don't know whether I should laugh at this or I should cry at this. This is the new age innocence. And the mother said that we do not put on news. We don't discuss news. We do not discuss these things at home. I don't know from where my 5-year-old knew that he had to answer like this. कि हाँ मैं मुसलमान हूँ लेकिन मैं beef नहीं खाता. And this is not about one family. Fear, we wear fear. It is something it's a fabric around us. I live in a gated colony, in a gated society, and when I told you this story just now before we met, when the person who supplies me with my non-vegetarian food, which includes fish, chicken, mutton, the person is very distinctly, stereotypically Muslim. He wears the surma, he wears the skull cap, and when he comes to supply, we get a call from the security guard saying that, "Madam, aapka mutton aaya hai." And my husband would freak out. He'll be like, "No, if this guy is going to say mutton, ask him, please do not deliver, we'll order from Big Basket." And then the person who supplies the meat is like, "Kyun sahab aise kyun react kar rahe hain? What's wrong in saying mutton?" He's like, "No, just say food." Like, "But what's wrong?" So my husband says, "Ki kya pata tumhara bakra ka beef ban jaye?" This is us. I'm asked, why do you fear when a lynching happens out there? I say that as a Muslim growing up, I know that we are fused in class when it comes to our identity as Muslims. And the reason I wrote this book, the reason it was important to tell the names of these 25 schools where these kids study in Delhi NCR, it was important to show that these kind of elements go beyond class economics. Yeah. All these conversations are happening in our houses. So whether we have been complicit in this or complacent about this, we are equally responsible for what we have done to all kids. This, I cannot underline enough, it's not about Muslim kids.
Yeah, no, in fact, it's important to name some of the schools that you mentioned in the book to again bring home just how immediate this whole experience is. So, you know, schools like Shiv Nadar, Shiv Shantar, as you said, DPS,
Sanskriti,
you know, so these are schools which are really inhabited by exactly the kind of people who we are in this audience and on stage. But again, Nazia, you know, I want to very quickly share with the audience what impact this has, you know, so what's the pressure from within as well. But before that, there's another shocking story in your book about the kind of segregation. You know, we keep talking about the blacks and we look at America. You would never think of segregation the way, you know, again, you have ghettos in lower economic communities, but the fact that there is this level of segregation in our school is really an eye-opening thing. So again, would you share that and how that functions? And also the question I asked you earlier about a kind of hierarchy of insult, you know, so if you're Pakistani or Bangladeshi.
That's very interesting and very intelligent of the kids. So the insults have a hierarchy. So if you belong to not such a privileged economic class, you're called a Bangladeshi. If you're privileged, then you're a Pakistani. And even the terrorist names keep changing with as and when who is in the news. So I remember when we were kids, my brother was called Hamas. Now nobody would probably remember Hamas. But, and it was like once in a blue moon then. The difference now is that it's happening every day. And you're called Osama, Baghdadi, or something else based on who and when is in news. And make no mistake, this is happening every day. This is not isolated incidents. This is your kid and my kid and as I said, every school. And I believe,
it's totally true. I was sharing with you that
I have still touched the tipping. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. Make no mistake, this is happening in every school, in every level of a society. It's probably much worse in other places. Delhi NCR, of course, we have somehow really messed up our system.
No, and in fact, I was sharing with you that even my child, when he was 4 or 5, came home from, no, would have been a bit older, 6 or 7, came back from school one day and asked, you know, Mama, any Indians Muslims, or are they all Pakistanis, you know? And I remember being really shocked because our home is not one which exudes this. But clearly it is in the school ecosystem, you know, that it doesn't matter where you come from, you're picking it up because of what your friends are saying or what you're watching on TV or whatever's being discussed.
We think that all those jumlebazi is limited to a political rallies or a 9 p.m. bulletins or the idiot box. But it's not. Our kids are listening. I remember when I had my kid, my pediatrician told me that don't think that you'll be watching over the kid. It's the kid who will be watching you. And this book is so evident of my doctor's words.
So again, I'm going to quickly come to what's happening within the community and the pressure from within, but would you just share with the audience the segregation we were talking about?
Oh, yes, the segregation. Now, that was shocking because not expected. So what's happening is that places where usually we have that 1 or 2 Muslims in a class, but places where there are many more, so there'd be like 10, 15. And I remember in our time, the elective subjects, so where you have Sanskrit and an elective, which is a regional language, that is more used in that area. So we were that elective subject for that one class, that period, we would change sections. So the ones taking Sanskrit would go in the Sanskrit class, the ones taking Urdu or any other regional language would go in that respective class. Now, because you have lots of sections, instead of doing it, allotting that one period for changing. They make class sections based on the elective language. It doesn't sound bad now, but wait for it. Section A, Sanskrit. Section B, French. Section C, German. Section D, Urdu. Who do you think takes Urdu? What do you think would be the one factor that will be there in that section? It'll be Muslim kids. I mean, that can be a different whataboutery dialogue about why do Muslims need to take Urdu and why do, I mean, more, but let's face it, more and more people who are Muslims take Urdu. So that section becomes a Muslim section. I first encountered this in Bhopal, which was shocking. And there it has been happening from a long time because Bhopal, as a city, has a lot of Muslim, the ratio is quite high. Then I found it even in Delhi schools, in certain pockets. Not pockets, but well-known, well-established chains of very reputed schools, which might be having their, the catchment area might be a Jamia or a Nizamuddin. So one of the teachers told me that now what they try to do is that mix Urdu and French together so that it doesn't become very in-your-face Muslim. Now, French would be like 3 or 4 takers. Urdu would be, the rest of the class would be 25 would be Urdu. And one of the parents wrote that I want to change the section of my child because of the M factor. And the parent was obliged.
But you were also saying that, I'll quickly share with you before we move on that but
continuing on that line, sorry, but we think that our children are going to the same school. We think they're entering the same door, but they're not. They are not on a daily basis sitting together. They're not sharing the tiffins. They're not playing together. They say कि हमारे तो दोस्ती नहीं बन पाते दूसरे section वाले. We never grew up with. We think that all Hindus and Muslims are growing up together. That's what the idea of India is. But no. They go to the same school, but there's a segregation happening on linguistic lines, which becomes a religious line at the end of the day.
And, again, what Nazia's brought out in the book is that there's not only this segregation and so this isolation, you don't meet people, you don't make friends, you're just called the M factor, but that there is an assumption that only lower IQ children will be in the Urdu section, and so most teachers don't want to teach the Urdu section. So less accomplished teachers are assigned to the Urdu section, and then the better teachers are assigned to the Sanskrit section. So there is a constant internalization, a self-hatred, that like Nazia said earlier, there's a kind of signaling of just your Muslim identity from this age. And so if they come out psychologically sound, that really is a miracle, and it's not just a normal process at all.
Like the story of Saad, where there was a terrorist attack in France, and the next day the teacher comes in. It was an English class, and Saad is the only Muslim child in the class. The teacher comes in and picks up the newspaper and says, "Ye dekho kya ho raha hai duniya mein," and she sits down. And there's this 2-minute pin drop silence when suddenly a voice comes out and says, "Saad, ye kya kar diya tune?" And Saad looks down because he can feel eyes over him. He is isolated, he has been singled out, he has been asked a question which has a lot of implications. And Saad is 10. And Saad says that I was waiting for my teacher to respond. My teacher was in class. The teacher sat there. There was 2 minutes later, she stands up and resumes the class without addressing the elephant in the room. So we think, try to understand that how a 10-year-old internalizes this or how a 6-year-old internalizes this. They do something, it's not addressed. The bullier thinks it's an easy handle and it's okay. It's okay to say this. He can get away with this. That means he can do it again. The bullied thinks it's okay because nobody responded, nobody addressed this problem, which means that there must be something wrong with him or her, and this is going to happen again, and they don't trust the system anymore to address this. That means they have to find their own way. I think our children have totally lost their trust in us. They think we adults are not behaving like adults. we are not behaving like the responsible people we are supposed to be, and we can't handhold them through this world of hate and hostility that we have created for them. They're just navigating on their own.
So Nazia, this is just like a glimpse of what that experience of being a Muslim kid in what is supposedly a cosmopolitan strata of society is. But now, there's the other pincer movement that I spoke of, which is of what is it like to be a Muslim within the Muslim community, and the pressure that's coming from within. So would you talk about that a little and the extremes that is going to?
So the book essentially is like two parts. The first part is the world outside, about how our children are in the outside world told that your only identity is that of being a Muslim, while the world inside the community, where the community itself keeps telling our children that, hey, you're not Muslim enough, you have to do no more. So whether you are visibly a Muslim person, you are wearing a hijab, you're wearing a niqab, no matter where on that level of Islamization you are, there's always that next level that you're supposed to achieve. So it's a rabbit hole. It just keeps going on and on and on till probably there is no end to it. So imagine the child caught in this vortex. So one side he's like, okay, I'm a Pakistani, I'm a terrorist, I'm a Muslim. And at home he's like, अभी तो भाई बहुत आगे राह है देखनी है आपको तो अभी तो बहुत ज़्यादा मुसलमान होना है आप तो मज़हब फॉलो ही नहीं कर रहे. So the child is caught in this double meaning. They don't know how to figure out what their identity is, what their self-esteem should be. I feel sorry for the kids out there who are in this position.
Again, I'm just going to run through some of this so that we can arrive at, what have been the responses, the reactions, your own, experience and how it's left you feeling. But just again, the things that we so casually don't look at is that there's another story about a young boy who tried to buy a bike or get a bike registered, and the police said...
at IIIT.
Yeah, and said that I don't want to give you this registration because how do I know when you might put a bomb on it,
That's
so there's this constant...
That's the registrar speaking, telling him.
Yeah, that's what the registrar told this young boy. So again, the reason why I'm emphasizing this is that what it's doing to an entire generation of young kids is that there are 13-year-olds now who are going to the mosques and going for azan in the morning because there is a great need to belong. There is a pressure, the haram police from within the community, because the more the majority community is foregrounding the Muslimness of this community, there is a desire then to get at least accepted by your own side. So what we are really forcing 180 million people to do is to embrace the one identity that they don't necessarily have to think about. And it's again worth recalling that only about 70 out of 180 million people so far have taken to violence or got recruited by the ISIS. But what is the psychological catchment that we're creating for young kids to actually want more acceptance and greater sense of identity by embracing, in larger numbers, what so far only 70 kids have done with the ISIS, and homegrown as well. There's only about 200 children in this decade of 15 years of Muslim terrorism, as we call it. Only about 200 boys have ever been implicated, and many of those are false cases as well. So
that brings me to this mother from Bhopal, who comes from a royal lineage. And she sent her child to the Delhi College Indoor, and where the child was called a terrorist and a Pakistani. And he comes, and some mother tells me that he has disturbing memories from that school where he was singled out and bullied. And then he comes back to Bhopal and starts studying in these schools where the segregation is happening, so he does not have Muslim friends. Then I see he plays on his Xbox, which are violent games. He gets WhatsApp forwards of beheadings by ISIS or orchestrated lynchings for the camera of Muslims in India. So I'm very worried, she says. She says there's a deep cause for concern, and I feel her, because we really don't know how the child is taking in all these different diverse experiences, and how is he internalizing that, and how he's going to grow up and use those experiences in his own way.
So, Nazia, again, we've shared with the audience some sense of what your book is about and the landscape of experiences that it has made visible. When you spoke to the schools, about the fact that this was going on in the schools, what was the response? What is the range of responses that you got?
So I wrote back to all the 25 schools mentioned in the book, and I've listed the 25 schools. And at least 9 to 10 out of them never came back with a response. Only Vasant Vihar said that they don't want to comment on it because it's a sensitive matter. And the rest of them, I had the principals, around 5 or 6 principals calling me up and showing concern over if this is happening in the institution, but everybody denied that this is happening. They said that we do not know about this happening, we don't think this is happening. The under-reporting is so immense, Shoma, it's, I mean, I had never as a Muslim heard about this, and I go in the so-called liberal circles. So why is the under-reporting happening? Because when it happens for a 5 or 6-year-old, we think it's an isolated incident, and how can the child be so intelligent to do this? It's innocent. But as I said, they internalize it as an okay handle, and later on, and the bullied feels that there's no point complaining because it was never addressed in the first place. And this then becomes even worse when they grow up, and then absolutely no reporting happens in the other cases because they don't want to look like a sissy when they report and go to their parents. The children say, don't. They tell their parents that don't. In fact, mothers are never, I found such an overwhelming number of mothers who are not in sync with the reality of the child. The many mothers would tell me, नहीं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, बहुत अच्छा है इंडिया, आप क्या बोल रही है? आओ बेटा, आंटी को बताओ, कुछ नहीं होता ऐसा. And the child would give me this look and says, Mama, मैं तो हर दिन होता है मेरे साथ ऐसा. Every day I am told that तुम्हारे पापा माँ बम बनाते हैं क्या? तुम्हारे पापा आके मुझे तालिबान में तो नहीं है, वो आके shoot तो नहीं कर देंगे. Or girls, they have, because they cannot give it back. So there's an added layer of misogyny to this, where the girls are called ki, oh, you're showing off your legs. Not that they're very shapely. Will your father allow that? So it's pushed out in a joking way for the girls a lot. And they're expected to laugh along. If they react, it's seen as a weakness and it's further exploited.
So Nazia, what has this left you with? Now that you have put all of this into a book, the responses that you've been getting ever since the book got published, both from within the Muslim community or the outside world, and from within yourself, again, what has that experience been? What has it left you with?
Well, this book was supposed to answer my question as a millennial Muslim mother, what am I supposed to do? I still don't have that answer, because even after speaking to all these families, hearing all these stories, I've cried with the mothers, I've cried while listening to their interviews on record later, I've cried while writing this book. I mean, I couldn't write for more than 10 minutes without having an actual constriction in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I needed to go and take that walk before I could write further, because for me, these are not stories. For me, these are actual people and actual faces and actual emotions. I still ask that why, as a mother, do I need to have that script ready that when my child goes to school next year, when she'll be called a Pakistani terrorist, why, as a mother, need to have that script ready for an answer for my child? I ask that out aloud now. Because, and we need to acknowledge this problem. There's so much of denial. We like shoving things under the carpet. We like looking other way. We like talking hunky-dory things because, well, we don't want to face this. We want to look the other way because it's uncomfortable to talk about this. It's uncomfortable to accept that my child has been called a terrorist. How does a parent react? One of the mothers called up another mother and said that, and she wanted to have a dialogue with the mother because she felt, I also believe that no mother asks a child to hate another child. But when this mother reaches out to the other parent, she gets the answer that, क्या हुआ उसने terrorist बोल दिया, तुम्हारे बेटे ने भी तो मेरे बेटे को मोटा कहा था. That is the level of dialogue that we are having. So I think there is a lot of, as I said, our children don't trust us to handhold them in this time that we have. We as parents need to be more on the lookout for our kids and be the bullier or the bullied. We need to address their problems. And it might be that we are not complicitly telling them to hate, but if we have been complacent about the kind of hatred that has seeped into our society, then I think we are equally responsible for this.
So Nazia, did you try to reach out to any of like the kids who told you that they were bullied? Did you try to reach out to what I'm assuming would be the Hindu family or the Christian family, I don't know, but possibly just the majority community? Did you speak to any people from the bullying side of it?
So a lot of, I spoke at all, I couldn't of course say that your child bullied this child, and so I would ask them that, have you ever felt something like this happening with your child? So a lot of them would say that, yes, my child came back and asked me that, Mama, क्या सारे मुसलमान terrorist होते हैं? क्या सबको पाकिस्तान जाना चाहिए? And I didn't know how to handle that. So I kind of changed the topic, or even if I say, then I say, कि कहाँ से सुना? Why do you think so? I don't think we are ready with answers. I think, as I said, we need to have a script ready. My 3-year-old has just started to learn how to color and draw lines. The one thing she can, this might sound melodramatic, but it's the truth, that the one thing she feels she can do independently on her own and gives her pride is coloring the national flag. Because that's something she sees every day in her school. That's something that she can relate to, 3 bold colors, and that's it. And whenever we go out for a 3-year-old in a car, there's so many things to take in. There's just too much in the world outside. Buildings, other traffic, this, that. And whenever she spots that national flag anywhere, she's like, Mama, India ka flag. And she's excited. Tomorrow when she goes to school and is called a Pakistani, I don't know how she'll internalize that. And I don't know how to answer that. I don't know why I should answer that.
I'm going to, there are a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to open it up very quickly, but I asked you just one other question, which was that, how has the community responded to your book? Has it been published long enough for you to get a sense of...
we just hit the stands last weekend, but yes, there's a lot of people who are saying you're playing the victim card, I'm playing the Muslim card, and of course a lot of other trolling that happens.
This is being said by your own community or by others?
By both sides. So there's trolling from both sides happening, because I've taken on equally taken on equally the elements from both sides. But whenever they say this, that this is a Muslim card, whenever you say this, that this is a victim card, you are the reason that these parents cannot go out, these children cannot go out and say this is happening. You are the reason you are silencing this, and if you think silencing this will help, make no mistake, hate will suck up every child, and the India we are looking at is going to be very, very disturbed. Because these are the children who will be voting at the next elections. These are the children who will be voting in 2024. How else do you think they'll be voting if not on religious lines?
I'm just going to, sorry. So Yadav Mehra wants to ask you that, have you changed the way you mother your child after writing this book?
As I said, I'm still looking for that answer. That's why the call for all mothers I put out, that please stand up against bullying.
I'm sorry, I can't see who's sent this question, but it's a good one for you to address. That someone is asking that, there's so much of acceptance of a Shah Rukh Khan or a Saif Ali Khan, Salman Khan, Omar Abdullah, etc. What does that say to you about acceptance of Muslims who accept India?
Where does that acceptance go the moment they voice their concerns about anything happening? Do we still see that acceptance whenever they, it's a well-known secret that Shah Rukh Khan refuses to answer any political question whenever he's giving an interview. The first statement is, don't ask me politics, because he's done with. So is with every other Khan, or
no,
any card you play, be it a Hindu card, be it a Muslim card, any card you play today, it is affecting your child. Don't play any card.
No, I thought it's also important, I'm sorry I don't know who sent this question, but I think it's important to just foreground the fact that the question says, what does that say to you about acceptance of Muslims who accept India? So there's an implicit sense in that question that Muslims don't accept India. Did you?
Like that story of this teacher in school. So she is confused. So she was telling about the flags that different countries have, and she was confused about exactly how the Pakistani flag was. So she turns towards the Muslim child and asks, is this how the Pakistani flag is? I see the same thing in this question.
If we keep socioeconomic disparity apart, and as I think about it, a lot of our part-time staff are followers of Islam. They enter our kitchen, make our beds, the best skilled fine labor for furniture, embroidery, high fashion clothes, etc. are Muslim. Are you exaggerating the issue? By the way, I'm a Hindu who eats beef. Well, I don't even feel that that's fair to lob that question to Nazia because, and I will, but pardon me for addressing this question, that after hearing all of this, if we feel that we are exaggerating the issue, I think that's fairly self-reflective of what we were saying, that this is the community that is completely doing this and is blind to it, and very often actually doesn't speak up. We are not concerned about the fact that Muslims are being lynched in this country for absolutely nothing. A 12-year-old boy is pulled off the train and stabbed to death, and we don't feel strongly enough to be speaking out because we feel we're exaggerating the issue.
But this reminds me of this story where it was, and this is like a common experience among all Muslims will tell you this, how they always said, "Lekin aap to Musalman nahi lagte, acha hum Musalman hai." Like, yes, what were you expecting? Like, you know, you don't, then you ask, okay, which is the other Muslim you know? वो है ना हमारे जो मटन हमारे घर भेजते हैं, या वो हमारे दर्जी, आप वैसे नहीं लगते. I mean, excuse me, I think that's a self-explanatory answer that you, as I said, we are fused in class when it comes to being Muslims. And then you say that, why are you concerned when there's a lynching? It's a fringe. If you think that's a fringe, and then you expect us not to look like a fringe, I mean, there's a lot of confusion out there in the way you are thinking and behaving.
No, in fact, I'd just like to remind ourselves that we've spoken of two pressures, the pressure within the community, which is solidifying, getting more Islamicized because of this, constant, some of the questions that in fact are coming in. But the third part is that when people like the Election Commissioner of India, Mr. Qureshi, spoke about his son, or Shaban Azmi, or some of the really well-known Muslims in this country have spoken about how difficult they found to get a home, we've shunned that as not being a true experience, so that is the level that even if you speak out, it's not even accepted that such a thing happens.
Shoma, on that note, people ask me, why have you written the book? Now, after a week of facing all the trolling, I can tell you that the thing that I expect from this book, go beyond the cover, read the stories, and read the children of India speaking to you. And the only takeaway should be to recognize this as a problem. The first step would be to recognize that this is happening in our homes, in our front lawns, in our back lawns. This is happening with us. Only then will we be able to address the issue. But there's such a lack of understanding that this is happening.
There's a question from Rohit. There's just two more questions, and then we'll stop. That who is responsible for what you're describing?
As I said, whether you play the Hindu card or the Muslim card, all of you are equally responsible, because the 9 p.m. bulletins inevitably would be around a certain community, be it the national flag, be it Pakistan, be it Kashmir, be it Kashmiri Pandits, be it this, be it that, be it halala, be it love jihad, be it land jihad, be it anything, and every day your news is around a certain community. If the national dialogue around this is made to pinpoint and isolate a community, then of course the children will be mirroring that. The children are only mirroring the society that we have become. And we have left them all alone to handle this. We are not at risk. We are not behaving like the adults that we are supposed to.
There's another question which says, I have 2 children and both have been bullied at school. They successfully outgrew that. So I'm not sure if one can generalize the point of Muslim children being bullied on account of their religion. Don't you think this absolute generalization actually is adding to the problem rather than resolving it, if it's a problem at all in the first place? Children, after all, do have the unique ability to outgrow these biases far better than adults. Therefore, do you think this is more of a problem among us adults rather than children? Are we and the media overplaying this topic? This is what Rishi Srivastav has asked. And before Nazia answers it, I'll just remind you that she spoke of this incident where it was equated with bullying a child by calling him fat, with bullying another child and calling him a terrorist. So there is that equation, but of course, let Nazia take this question.
It's the same question. It's the same question doing, as I said, we want to look the other way. We don't want to accept it. I asked a mother, I remember the first time, the 5th or 6th time this came up in my questioning, when they said that my child has been called a terrorist. So my first reaction was like, can your child call the other child a terrorist, a Baghdadi or an Osama? Always the answer was no. They can't child the non-Muslim child as a Baghdadi or an Osama. It's only the Muslim child who's being called this. I think that should answer the child question.
Thank you very much, Nazia. You know, in a way, the questions that have come in, yeah, you want to put up your hands? One quick one.
The book just hit the stands last week, so the schools are now opening, and I hope that there will be a dialogue, I hope that the dialogue will be both with parents, with schools, with teachers, because all of us belong to the same, coming from the same place. Who are the teachers? The teachers are you, me, our aunts, our neighbors. So it's not a blame game. This book is not a blame game. It's an that is how I start the book, by saying that this is more of an eye-opener for us, to stock check where we as a nation stand. Because if we don't address this right now, God help us.
The reason I asked that question was, you have the same problem even in the US, where there are, similarly, if talking to the parents is not going to help you as much as trying to address those young minds and trying to capture and trying to change them. That might be a little more effective way.
So, as I said, a lot of principals did reach out, and not a lot, but yeah, a few did reach out, and they did say the right words, that secularism is not a light concept, it's not just a word for them, and they believe in it. A few, like the DPS Gurgaon principal called me and said, Aditi said that I am the biggest bully in my school. This is impossible that this can happen. If it's happening, I want to know and I want to address it. So I'm not saying that this, as I said, it's not a blame game. There's also a story of when a child was called a terrorist, how all the parents got together and wrote a letter to the institutions and said that we don't want our child to be with such a child who says this. And Shiv Nadar did a week-long session talking about us and them in different contexts, be it India, Pakistan, be it Hindu, Muslim, be it rich, poor. So that was a very nice, instead of making it about only one thing, they made sure that it talks about inclusivity in every sense. Yes, a lot has been done in the US. Trump talk and the effect on a similar effect in the schools there has been documented very well, researched very well, addressed very well. But are we US, are our schools, are we there yet? If you have seen the kind of questions coming in, go on social media, look at the dialogue around this happening. We'll know that where as a nation we stand and how, as I said, our kids don't trust us. We are not behaving like the adults we are supposed to be.
Excuse me? As somebody who's worked with children for nearly 36 years, and in fact, I've just superannuated as the principal of Sanskriti school that you were talking about. I must tell you that all children react very strongly to anything that is different from them. So you have only talked about Muslims. They will react strongly to a northeastern child. They will react strongly to a child who's very dark in complexion, comes from, especially in North Indian schools. And to say that the teachers, that the schools are not sensitive to it, like you said, enough reporting is not being done. But I can say for sure that as educationists, we are very, very conscious of creating, and we just don't talk about Muslims or Northeasterns or whatever. So mine is not a question, but I'm just kind of giving you some solace that educationists do talk about, and this is the main emphasis now for children to accept differences, for children to understand that there will be differences, not only in religion, but in capabilities. In the fact that there could be a slow learner, there could be a child who is autistic. So there are lots of differences in schools. And we've got to learn to cope with those differences. In your whole conversation, there was one particular point which I would very much appreciate, that it is time for parents, for us parents, to recognize the importance of talking about these differences at home, to completely destroy stereotypes, and to train our young minds to accept each other as humans, in spite of the fact that there are differences. Differences are going to be there. You and I were brought up in those differences.
I agree.
So it's a comment, and I felt strongly about it.
Thank you so much for that point. Thank you so much. I'd just like to add one thing to that. When you say that differences are there in various ways, I agree. In fact, the difference between a Hindu and Muslim was always there. I mean, as I said, my brother had also been teased once. But all these latent kind of differences have become very in your face in the last few years with the national dialogue around the community happening. If we are going to deny that, if we are going to say that no, we are not talking about a certain community all the time, we are not pinpointing a certain community all the time, then, well, look away. But this is what our children are doing.
Okay.
I completely agree with you that schools do not know about this problem. There's a highly...
But I think I'd just like to add that it's absolutely essential what you said, that in fact schools should be teaching our children to accept differences, but I think the moot question is, are they, you know? Because the experience, which is the official experience in the school, and the experience of the child in the, you know, the society of the school is very different. And what you mentioned, ma'am, about the Northeast question is definitely something which, it's true that the way we speak of Northeasterners is very much as, you know, racist as the way we speak about Muslim kids. So to say that the two things are happening, so we shouldn't isolate it, this particular book is about what Muslim kids are facing. I hope there are many books written about how Northeast kids are feeling about being in our posh schools, you know.
Hi, Nazia. I'm Dr. Parul.
Hi, Dr.
First, don't defend yourself too much. You've said your point. It's there. It's for people to choose to see it or to ignore it, right? I have studied in Algebra Muslim University for 12 years. I've done my MBBS, MS from there, and this was 30 years back, right? The Babri Masjid happened in the middle of a final prof when we were giving medical exams. 90% of my friends were Muslims. We used to study one month at each other's place. We were literally physically separated. The parents had to come to the district magistrate to take their kids off. It started then. If in today's date and time we do not agree to the fact that the right-wing Hinduism has again taken us back to 1992 Babri Masjid era, we are fooling ourselves. We are completely fooling ourselves, number one. Number two, I was the first person last year to start, when the Junaid lynching happened, I spearheaded single-handedly the campaign called Not In My Name. I was sitting in my bedroom and I started that campaign alone. And there were tons and tons of people who came out. There were artists who came out. So you have a lot of people supporting you. Let me tell you, 180 billion is not a minority. It's a huge population. It's a huge population. We are doing very well in our country. Please tell your community. What you need to do, Nazia, is also reach out to your leaders. Be fearless. Be fearless. Out of this 180 million, if you have only 0.1% of your Muslim leaders looking into your problems also, I think it will take us a long way. So the open dialogue is at both ends. It's at the non-Muslims, it's at the Muslims. It's a very complex problem, long colonial problem across the world. But let me tell you, India is still doing very well. We can still focus on the positivities. And please, not in my name. We should not discriminate. It has to carry at home. So please be as loud as you want to. Repeat it 100 times and don't be defensive.
Okay. Thank you. Just the last question, because I think we've really run out of time now.
Yeah. Actually, the division of religious lines is since 1947. I think it is the availability of media which sharpens whatever we see today, rather than that it is not existing in previous times. If it disappears from India, Trump is still on, the Middle East is still on, the kids have access to that. My only point is, and this is literally a point I'm adding to what that lady has said there, our school education is defunct today. That's the real problem. And I'm in the space myself in some areas. We need to teach the kids a critical thinking mindset to differentiate right from wrong. That is not taught in our schools, right? Because then they will be able to differentiate between this bias, that bias, or any other bias. Because to believe that we will be able to change ourselves and insulate them from this 24/7 barrage of global information is living in a fool's paradise. This is not going to happen.
May I just step in here for Nazia, because I think, as she said, this is not just a Muslim problem, it's a problem for all of us, that I think we must accept at least this much, that if we don't like Putin's atrocities, or we don't like the way the CIA have put, chemical gases on, on Turkish citizens, or we don't like the way Serbia is being handled, or we don't like what innumerable governments are doing, we don't like the way America is bombing Afghanistan civilians, we don't start saying that we don't like Christians because of what is happening. So the fact that today we equate, yes, there's an Islamist problem across the world, but if some crazy ISIS group is begun to get equated with the way we look at all Muslims, or we look at our children, or the way we speak of our children, is really equivalent to us having to answer for the Swami Asimanands in our country, or because we've had a history of Hindu traitors, kings that betrayed their own religion and their community. If our children today were called by the names of those traitors, I think if we were identified only if we looked like Yogi Adityanath, then I think we could equate this problem. But if we don't, we must accept that an Osama bin Laden being equated with what kids are facing in school, that saying that Middle East and et cetera, carries on, I think we really are being blind to the experience of others, I'm not saying you're saying that, but a lot of the questions and the rhetoric in our community does represent that. Many in our own families, definitely speak this language, that this is a overplayed problem. And again, speaking for Nazia, because I don't think it's only the Muslims that have to defend themselves.
That reminds me of a story, Shoma, towards, as I said, the second half talks about the community within. So it talks about how this big change in the community about when they went to work in the Middle East. There's a lot of influx, and in the Middle East of Indian Muslims working there. And when they came back, how they changed. And so there's a story of Dr. Waris's father, who had his house help, who was Vasudevan, and who was with him for 20 years. And so this nephew comes back from the Middle East and says that, I want to visit you. And then he says that, but I heard that your cook is not a Muslim. How will I have my food? So Dr. Waris says that, मियाँ मैं वासुदेवन जी की तो एहसासात को बुरा नहीं पहचाऊंगा, लेकिन मैं आपसे कहता हूँ कि आप मेरे पास मत आइए, आप इलाहाबाद जा रहे हैं, आप वहाँ चले जाइए, कभी ज़िंदगी रहेगी तो मैं वहीं मिल लूँगा आपसे. So it comes from both sides. We have to reach out and protect those around us equally for all communities. And that is the idea of India. Until we do that, there is hope, there will always be hope.
Thank you so much, Nazia. Sorry, I'm really sorry, we've run out of time. Let's stop for a drink break, and then, of course, we have Shatrughan Sinha coming up. And I just urge you to buy Nazia's book. As much as she has critiqued the experience of children facing the outside pressure, she has spoken about the kind of Wahhabism and solidification of what it means to be Muslim, coming from within the community as well. And I think she's very courageously taken on all sides of that problem. Salute you for that, Nazia, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Shoma. Thank you, everyone.